Hello and welcome back to the GI podcast. I'm your host, Sid Heeg, and filling in for Tobin today is Dr. Emma Vossen. Thank you for coming, Emma.
Hi.
We are joined by Dr. Randy Harris and three of his members of his research team who have been working on the Rhetoricon project and the Go Figure game, some of the longest running projects that have been worked on at the GI. And this is also by far the most guests we've ever had on the GI podcast. So because of that, I'm going to go around and let each of you introduce yourself. So you'll be giving your full name, your department or program if you're still learning and in school, and also your role on either or both of the projects. Also, we always start by asking our guests to tell us about their earliest memory with a game. It can be digital or a card game or a board game or whatever. So we'll start over here on my left. So start with your name and go on.
Hi, so I'm Drake. I'm a second-year computer engineering student, and this term I'm a developer on the team, and it's been pretty fun adding to Rhetoricon and Go Figure and whatnot. I think looking back, the earliest memory I have with a game would be watching my cousin play StarCraft when I was like 9.
Nice.
And definitely watching people play games is the first, and Minecraft, StarCraft, MapleStory, all the games in the 2020 or 2010s.
Nice.
Lots of fun.
Awesome. Yeah, hi, my name is Nathan. I'm currently the lead developer for the project. It's been a ton of fun working on this over the past 8 months. My earliest memory of a game is probably Minecraft way back in 2010 or so. We didn't play a lot of video games growing up. We had some board games, outdoor games, but nothing digital.
Awesome.
Cool.
I'm Randy Harris. I'm in the English Language and Literature Department. I'm also cross-appointed with Sheridan School of Computer Science. I'm the director of the project. In terms of games, at least in terms of video games, I'm prehistoric in that video games came after I showed up. But my earliest memory of a game, or possibly the memory of a memory, it's a kind of family legend. I was about 2 at the time. But we had a neighbor who was quite volatile, and a chessboard came sailing out of his kitchen window. And we were actually living in a duplex together, so their kitchen window was right beside our kitchen window. Went out, and we could hear him yelling and shrieking and swearing and so forth. And he was really an odd and cantankerous guy, and his wife disappeared. 6 or 7 years ago later, and there were rumors that she was one of his victims.
Wow, this is not a true crime podcast, but I'm okay with it turning into one.
Well, wait till you hear about the moose story. Yeah. But in terms of video games, my earliest memory is Pong, which my brother-in-law got and played on his big console TV, and I took a few shots at. The only game that I had any kind of deep commitment to, well, there were 2, but the one that really took over was Galgaza. It was an arcade game, and I became obsessed with it, and that's actually why I don't involve myself in video games anymore. It just took so much time away from other things that I gave up after that.
Amazing.
Thanks, Randy.
Hi, my name's Adeshola. I am in my 4th year in the Arts and Business program, majoring in sociology. Currently, my role in the project is admin officer and also co-leading the data and content team. My early experience with video games would probably have to be, I don't remember what age, maybe 6, 7. But it was when I still lived in Nigeria. It was back when they still had the PS3s. And it was with this game called Tekking. It was really popular, and my cousin played it a lot, so I would watch them play, and I would also play with them. I wasn't good at video games. The only game I was really good at, because this was after I moved here to Canada. It was this boat racing game called Hydro Thunder. It was on the Xbox, and we had the full version of it. So I played it a lot, and I had fun because I was able to play with my brothers.
Nice.
Yeah,
that's great.
All right, so thanks everyone for joining us today. So we're going to discuss, for the listeners, the Rhetoricon database and the Go Figure game, which draws and builds on the database. And so when writing these questions, I realized that before we do anything else, I need to get one of you to define for the audience what a rhetorical figure is, as that definition is just so key to this project, and I don't want any of our listeners to be confused when we start just throwing out rhetorical figures.
I think we have a good candidate for who should talk about this.
Adeshola.
No.
Okay. Well, that's one of the problems with rhetorical figures is that there's just a huge number of linguistic maneuvers that have been called rhetorical figures over the millennia since they first started being cataloged. So I constrained myself to what are called schemes and tropes, and they're frequently defined as deviations from ordinary language. One being a deviation. The tropes are conceptual deviations, so things like metaphor, metonymy, synecdoche, hyperbole, antithesis, where you shift in some semantic direction away from kind of ordinary daily talk. And schemes are formal deviations in the sense of things like rhyme and alliteration and schemes of balance and repetition. So an apple a day keeps the doctor away is a rhyme, but also has a prosodic repetition in it. And figures tend to work that way. Figures tend to work in constellations, and that's one of the things that we've been developing in our project and what's motivated the database. So a typical, here's an arcane term for you, antimetaboly. That's the name of a figure of reverse lexical repetition. So all for one, one for all, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country, structures like that. And if you go for a definition of antimetaboly, it'll say reverse word repetition. And it'll give you an example like all for one, one for all. And what rhetoricians have been really, really sloppy about for thousands of years is noticing that there's more going on than just one figure in any given instance. And that's what makes them salient. So they recruit attention and they impress memory. And that's how they affect our cultural word hoard, our cultural collection of language. So all for one, one for all, for instance, does have a reverse lexical repetition, all for one, one for all. But it's also quite crucial that there's medial repetition, all for one, one for all. It also has the same prosodic repetition that I talked about earlier. All for one, one for all has exactly the same phonological contour to it, intonation, stress pattern. I'm not sure what terms are most familiar to you and your listeners.
Intonation? I don't know. Is it different than intonation? Like.
And there's yet another. Actually, there's more figures, but the other kind of crucial one is called parison, which is syntactic repetition. So all for one, one for all have exactly the same syntactic structure as well. I could go on.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I think we've got it. I mean, I think the thing that's so interesting about it is that we do like read and encounter and use rhetorical figures every day. But if you ask the average person, like, what's a rhetorical figure? They'd be like,
You don't notice. Yeah.
No, you would never notice. Yeah.
So what's it been like for you guys coming into this project, learning about rhetorical figures, especially since not all of you are from like an English background like Emma and I are. So what has been your kind of like learning of this whole experience of like language in general?
Yeah, coming into the project, I didn't know very much or anything about rhetorical figures. It's been a great experience to like diversify what I'm exposed to and to have interactions with people who know a lot more about the subject than I do. But yeah, it's been a great learning experience coming in from a purely mathematical computer science background.
That's awesome. What about you, Drake?
Yeah, I'm on the same boat as Nathan here. When I first came here, I had like no clue what any of these rhetorical figures were other than like a metaphor. so and then like a week after, I kind of sat down with Professor Harris in his office and I asked him like, okay, well, what are the applications? And then like any engineering student, he explained to me exactly what the applications were, and I think it would be better if he himself mentioned it. But once I heard kind of the example, Exhibit A, B, and C's start rolling in, then it made sense. And making sense, it does give a lot more interest and motivation to actually get working on this stuff. Yeah. And so
And the
what it is, yeah.
definitions are almost, I don't want to say the definitions are useless, because obviously they're useful for people who understand all the individual terms and the definitions, but it's just the perfect example of where an example is almost entirely necessary. Like you say, all for one and one for all, and everyone's like, oh, I get it. But if you gave just the straight definition, they'd be like, they wouldn't be able to come up with the example themselves necessarily. Yeah.
So before we get into more of the details here, I feel like we need to establish a base understanding of the history of the project, since it's been going on for so long and there's been so many people involved in the project, to the point where Pam, our interdisciplinary project and communications manager here at the GI, who was a guest, who has been a guest on the podcast previously, has worked on the Rhetoricon project as a co-op student back when she was in high school. So, that's many, many years ago. And since then, there have been, I want to say, about maybe 30 to 40. I wouldn't be able to say how many.
A lot of
a lot of different students. There are larger cohorts, there are smaller cohorts changing over every 4 to 8 months. So Randy, can you talk a little bit about how the long history of this project, where it first started for you, and how it's evolved over time?
Yeah, that is a long history, and a quite involved one. But so I first became interested in the computational ends of figuration, because it seemed clear to me, although there was very little discussion of it in the literature, it seemed really clear to me that figures, and especially figure complexes, work by appealing to neurocognitive pattern biases. So we're biased towards things that repeat. We're biased towards things that are balanced. We're biased in any kind of exposure to stimuli, things that are opposite or similar to each other or proximal to each other. We're just wired to pay attention in those directions. Probably as mammals, maybe even as vertebrates, rather than not just as humans. And the way figures work is to play to things like our sense of balance and repetition and proximity and so forth. And so I wanted to build what's called an ontology of rhetorical figures, that is, recognizing how they work in terms of their appeal to neurocognitive pattern biases. We just call them neurocognitive affinities usually in the project, how they appeal to affinities, and how they cross-classify by linguistic category. So rhyme, for instance, is a repetition of a syllable at the end of a word. So it appeals to our pattern biases for repetition and position. And linguistically, it's a phonological repetition because it's a syllable that repeats, or multiple syllables. And lexically, it's a position because it's at the end of a word. And if you look through all of the schemes and tropes, you can find ways which the neurocognitive pattern biases are realized in different linguistic domains. And so I wanted to build an ontology. And I started talking to my colleagues in computer science, and Christiane DeMarco and I started a project together to build an ontology. But she kept saying, why? What's the point? What do you keep looking at these things for? So they reveal something about the mind. I mean, she's a cognitive scientist as well as a computational linguist, and so she knew there was a kind of inherent scientific gain to it, but she was a practical computational linguist. And why are we looking at these things? What can we do with them once we categorize them in our ontology? And so I went to some work, especially by Jean Fanistock, who shows that at least a certain class of figures correlate strongly with communication patterns. So if we take all for one, one for all again, that expresses a kind of reciprocality. And it expresses reciprocality. Am I getting too pedantic?
No, I'm following you, but I have a PhD in English, so...
Okay. So it expresses a certain kind of communicative function, whereby the two terms are put into reverse relations to each other. So you can see why that would be partly the case because of the repetition. But what's really crucial about it is that the syntactic patterns also repeat. And so when the terms repeat, they occupy different syntactic and semantic categories. So first all is the head of the noun phrase and one is the object of a preposition, and then it goes exactly the reverse. One is the head of a preposition and is the head of the noun phrase and all is the prepositional object. And so when you reverse things and maintain the same syntactic frame, you're getting reciprocality. So all is obliged to look after and defend the interests of the one, and the one reciprocally is obliged to look after and defend the interests of the all. And it turns out that that's a really kind of rampant pattern. So Newton's third law of motion, he expresses, it's more famously rendered as for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, which is another figure, polyptoton. But he expresses it as a anti-metabolic kind of complex of this repeated syntactic structure and reverse lexical repetition and medial terms, that whole kind of complex. As if the horse draws on a stone, the stone also draws on a horse. If a finger pushes on a stone, the stone also pushes on a finger. And so it expresses this reciprocality. And at that time, there was some work going on to detect figures by computational linguists because they're relatively easy to find in corpus. But they'd find them and say, look, I found an antimetabole, and look, I found another antimetabole. But they weren't doing anything once they found them. So what we wanted to do is build a system where when we found them, we knew what to do with them. We knew what kind of extra grammatical communicative function they were serving. And so that got us to expand the database that we were working on to correlate with functions as well as just patterns. And then we realized that machine learning could be quite productive if we could train machines up on these patterns and turn them loose on corpora. We could test some of our hypotheses and work towards advanced natural language processing, so we could understand extra grammatical kind of meanings as well as the base grammatical meanings that NLP natural language processing was pretty good at. But you need a lot of data for machine learning, and so we needed to build up the database, and we turned to crowdsourcing in general, which has been a really successful scientific project. The Wikipedia is probably the most famous crowdsourced project. But CAPTCHA, for instance, most people don't realize is actually a crowdsourcing tool by Google for optical character recognition. So if you answer a CAPTCHA based on these scrambled up and distorted kind of letters, you're teaching the machine learning system about recognizing all the books that Google has scanned with fuzzy kind of scanning. So crowdsourcing is a really productive kind of method to in these cases, gather data. It's also been used really productively in a game context to solve puzzles. So Fold It, for instance, it's been a really impressive game that has people using their spatial recognition to solve puzzles that teach algorithms how to recognize protein folding. And it's made a huge amount of progress. And in fact, I think one of the AIDS enzymes was recognized in something like 3 weeks through using this puzzle-solving game, where it had taken years and years and years just to kind of isolate that protein in the first place. And there's lots of these kinds of games that are really successful.
I was just going to say, just to go back a bit, could you maybe explain for our audience that's maybe not very familiar with typical machine learning, how your approach differs from a conventional approach?
Well, the main thing that we contribute is rich annotated data. Most machine learning goes these days. Deep learning works with massive unstructured data, and then they refine it and refine it and refine it in various ways. We can provide the rich data from the ground up. So rather than having the machinery produce some data, give it to humans to sort out to figure out if it's made the right decisions, and then back to the machine, back to the humans, back to the machine, back to the humans until it's ready for release. We can start at the bottom with rich data.
I feel like what is to me the most interesting about the project. Like, I feel like in a grant application of yours I read, you talked about the difference between large language models and small language models. Is that sort of the similar idea?
Yeah. So if we have the rich data, we don't have to expose the machinery to massive amounts of data, which means more compute time and just more data gathering, more scraping, and so forth. And there's also lots of quite unfortunate side effects in that the larger the data set and the more compute, the more environmental resources, the more power is consumed, the more water is consumed to cool the processors. I don't know if you've heard or not, but Microsoft just bought itself a nuclear plant only to
Yes.
power AI data centers.
And
But also these data sets are, because they're just scraped from the internet, which is full of all kinds of junk and toxic elements. What the systems that scrape the data from the web have to do is somehow kind of hold it in. I'm gesturing here to kind of as what they call guardrails to keep all the toxic data
Yes.
in. But if you can start with rich data already, you can start with smaller data sets, filter them earlier, and just get the toxic stuff out before you start the main processing.
Yeah, like it's the so I guess before, because I'm about to jump forward to the game, but maybe to go back to the history, then we should establish at what point did the idea of developing a game come into the history of the project?
I don't know if there's a real kind of eureka moment or not. I think it might be just that I saw Steve Wilcox just walking around, and it just started percolating with me. A couple of days later,
Steve is a really good friend of mine, so that's just funny to me.
yeah. So yeah, and Steve is a very noted games researcher for folks who probably anyone listener to the podcast probably knows who Steve is. But he was a student here who's now running a game lab in Brantford, Wilfrid Laurier Brantford, and I think just seeing him. And just the idea just kind of percolated. And then I approached him and Neil Randu, who I'm sure everyone listening to the podcast knows as well, about putting together a proposal to build a game sourcing project to incentivize people to stock our database.
Yeah, and just a little sidebar, just with Steve in general, is that Steve was doing a PhD in English, but did two things very differently that have very much changed how people do PhDs, I think, in the department, which was that he, if I'm not mistaken, did one of his language requirements in a programming language, which at that point no one had done before. It was like everyone did what I did, which was you take a French exam.
You just fumble your way through.
Yeah, you're just like, I can read French.
It was on the books, but nobody took advantage of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So he actually did that. And then the other thing he did is he actually made a game as part of his dissertation, which, now I feel like the concept of a ludic dissertation is becoming pretty accepted. But at the time, I feel like people were some people were not happy with the idea of it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Props to Steve, and also props to Amy Morrison, Professor Morrison, who guided him through that, and not just guided him intellectually, but administratively had to get it approved by the department and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So I'm going to focus a bit more on the students here as part of the project, just because your roles may have shifted. Some of you have been here for a very long time, very short time, and I just want to get a perspective of kind of like what drew all of you into the position as like looking at it as a co-op position. But first, we're going to start with Adeshola, who has been on part of the project for quite a long time, and your position has kind of changed over that time as well. So I want you to talk a bit more about what it is that you've experienced and how it is that your role has shifted over time.
When I first came to the project, I was just a research assistant on a co-op term. It was actually my first co-op term and my first job. I was very excited. I was working with Professor Harris under Rhetorica, who was supervising me. It was real, everything was new to me, and just learning about the figures too, because a lot of my job at the time was helping clean the old database. And so it's I had like it was a lot of self-learning, but I also was able to communicate with my supervisor and Professor Harris about some of the figures, and it was it was so interesting. Like there were so many patterns and linguistics because it's like you're just limited to like a few of them in high school, alliteration. I'm not even sure if alliteration, similes, and metaphors. And it's like I was able to learn that, there were different categories of figures, schemes, and the tropes. And like the schemes more so did with like repetition. And also like repetition of words too, because alliteration is a repetition of sound. But it's like also learning about like the repetition of words and like their positioning. Like the ploki and also some of like its subfigures were very new to me at the time. And it's like it was just so interesting learning about it too. And then there was like this figure that kind of caught my attention. It was called hypothera. It's not one we like use a lot now, but at the time like it was, because it's like some of the examples too, I found them funny because they were like jokes. But I really liked that figure. And then like some of the other repetition figures, I like those a lot because it was like so easy to spot. And I mean, yeah, it was like, and it just comes natural. And then it's like when you actually like when you actually read stuff online, and it's like you see like after learning about some of these figures, you start seeing some of the patterns. And I was like, oh, I know what this figure is. And it was so cool. And then yeah, I came back again in the summer. Professor Harris was great because, like, I mean, I was applying for co-op again, and I saw that there was an opening, and I applied, and Professor Harris said I could have the job if I wanted, and I was like, okay, that sounds great, I'll take it. And so I came back as a senior RA. Obviously, I was still doing my RA job, and then I was also dealing with more tasks. And since I had experience on the project, my role was trying to help people new to the project understand it better, because I had like the experience, I had like the new like fresh memory, and then also and also like I had experience, so it was like kind of like an in between. And then I decided to stay and like finish my co-op terms on the project. And so Professor Harris wanted to help me with like development, and also like trying to like see what I like want to get out of the job, like not just like doing rhetorical figures. And so that's how my role changed. And so I tried like project management, where I was just like dealing with like the task, like planning everything for the term, and then also admin. And I worked a lot with Nathan and the development team, because it's like the biggest team we've had. And so Professor Harris needed someone to kind of like bridge the gap between data and content, and also development. I mean, Renzi also helped a lot with that. She was involved too, but like I was there full time, so I was with them a bit more on the project last summer, and it was a very great experience. I mean, I learned that project management and also like a role with the admin officer is like something I would want to do, and I'm so happy I was I was given the opportunity to do so, and thank you a lot, Professor Harris.
So it's definitely like impacted your like idea of what you might want to do in the future. Yeah, that's cool.
Nathan, let's focus a bit more on your role as part of the project, especially since you've been like you're coming to the end of technically like month 8 as your part of the project.
Yeah, so I've been on the project for the past 8 months as the lead developer. I don't think Professor Harris knows this, but back in winter, I actually had several job offers extended to me, and I was really trying to choose between them. What do I want to do? And I ended up going with this position because it was I took a bit of a pay cut because I really wanted this experience leading big projects. I had some I had done some work with project lead in my previous role. But coming in here, it was a bit of a bigger scope. I had more team members available to me, and I'm really happy with what we were able to accomplish. Stepping in, there were a lot of things that I wanted to change, to put it lightly. But I wasn't happy with how some of the code was written, how some things were structured. So I really came in, made a big racket, disrupted a lot of things, but I'm really happy with where we've come as far as the project in the past 8 months.
Well, and I feel like just, purely from my perspective, eavesdropping.
Yes.
Sitting, you guys are in the collaboration space, my cubicle's right there, as it seems like it was a lot of opportunity for you to not just like manage a team, but also a lot of like teaching and problem solving and mentorship and you've got great communication skills. I can tell you that from my eavesdropping. So
yes,
and that's not everything. Like that's not something every developer can say.
Yeah,
I guess
exactly.
to put it lightly.
And even beyond that, this is the first role I've had working in a physical office. All of my previous experience, because of COVID, has been completely virtual.
Right.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Drake, you may have only been with us for a bit of a short time, but what has been your experience or major takeaways from working on a project like this?
I think definitely the best part of working on Rhetoricon so far is being able to see the full scope of the project. So a lot of the times, what I was thinking about applying to clubs in the past was I was afraid that when you join a team as part of a bigger company, like I wouldn't even know how the code I'm writing affects a product of a team of a company.
Yeah.
And so being one of 2 developers this term that are full-time, it is really nice seeing from front end to back end database to all the little changes that we add, how it works. And as a result, I get to learn things that I didn't expect I would learn. So for example, I kind of got destroyed on developments in like September-ish, and that was a humbling experience. And so it's something that definitely would not have happened if I was anywhere else. And like Nathan said, it's also my first in-person role. And I was also worried about, for example, getting like a manager that was like a 45-year-old like a person that was completely out of touch with, and they would invite me on golfing weekends as their activities. But it's super nice having like Nathan as a team lead who's around my age, as well as having professors as the directors and having other peers that are my age as well. So that's really welcoming as like my first in-person role.
Yeah, like you're getting mentorship from a professor, but also peer mentorship.
Exactly. And so I can talk about co-op with them, I can talk about jobs with them, and it's really nice because of that. But overall, the project has been amazing. I've been learning on so many parts.
So just to go back to the big picture for a second, this is obviously an incredibly interdisciplinary project. So not only is Randy an extremely interdisciplinary scholar, for people who don't know, Randy has 2 graduate degrees in science and 2 in arts. And then obviously the team at this table is interdisciplinary. And then the larger team who's worked on this project over time is, incredibly interdisciplinary. So the other thing I want to mention, just because I feel like this is so fascinating, is that this project has received funding from the NSERC Discovery Horizons program and the SHRC Insight program and the SHRC Partnership Engage program. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And I don't think there's many researchers in Canada who could say that. So obviously that's all very positive stuff about interdisciplinarity. And obviously we wouldn't all be so devoted to interdisciplinarity if we didn't think it was positive. But I was hoping that any of you could talk about any challenges that you faced trying to coordinate a huge project like this across disciplines. You've already talked a little bit about how, you're learning things different than you would have learned on any other project. But yeah, I'd just like to hear anything about that. Yeah.
Yeah, the Games Institute is a fantastic space. There's so many people working on so many different things. we're doing linguistics and computational work. Marco will walk by holding this random leg that he's made.
Marco and his leg.
Marco and his leg. You see all these like projects and posters of people who have done such diverse work. I really enjoy the experience of having such a diverse team at the Games Institute.
Yeah, I guess it's like you're getting exposed to interdisciplinarity on your team, but then by working physically at the GI,
Exactly, yes.
it's also the interdisciplinarity of the GI as a whole. Yeah.
Adeshola, for you, because you're coming from the arts and business or the ARBIS side of things, how have you been managing to communicate with, say, people from computer science and learning how to communicate more effectively when you're working on a project like this?
So I feel like it's just like the communication with them is more natural.
I actually love that answer.
I don't know what to say. But it's like I talk because I'm very comfortable around them. So it's like I talk to them like I would. And it's also interesting like learning stuff about their program and also some of the courses they have to take. It gives kind of like an insider. Like I get to learn more because it's also something I love doing. And like just learning about their program and also even learning about some of the grad students and the PhD students, like what they have to deal with on a daily basis. I think it gives me a perspective because I like if I were to have like because this term I had a course with like a PhD student, and it's like just based on like a bit like just based on like being in an environment with PhD students, I'm like I kind of understand why she's like I mean not like but like why she's like seems like tired and stressed
And maybe broke.
Burnt out, yeah.
but like it's just like just having that perspective and just being able to take it wherever I go or even like to my classes. It's just nice to it's nice to have, and it's just very eye-opening.
Yeah, like it's like almost like you have more of an idea of just how the university runs in general instead of being limited to like your specific program.
Yeah, because a lot of I mean there have been a couple of like students who work with developers, but a lot of them typically work in like marketing, and also like most students in ARBIS like they tend to go for marketing jobs, and it's like a bit different for me because I'm doing research and it's like and also like I'm more involved with the university too. So it's just like a different perspective whenever like I communicate with other people like my friends in my program.
So not to put you on the spot, but do you feel like you fit in more with like the developers and stuff than with people in the ARBIS program? Like, does it feel like more like, or I guess maybe at the GI, does it feel like more of like a natural fit or?
It feels more of a natural fit. Yeah, because I don't think I have like, I mean, a lot of my friends I made like at the beginning of my undergrad, but those are like the people I talk to more. Like if like I'm not able to like make connections with a lot of the people in my classrooms. I'm more so able to do that outside of class, and it's like I'm given the opportunity to do that in the GI and like make friends with a lot of people there. Like even like with like a lot of my extracurriculars, because I'm involved in clubs too. Like you make a lot of your friends there, and it's like so nice. Like I've been put in like a work environment where I'm also I do my work obviously, but I'm also able to interact with people, make friends, learn more about their disciplines, and it's also like within the university too, which is super nice.
Yeah, I mean, networking, right? Like, Randy, do you have anything to add about interdisciplinarity and maybe some of the like the hurdles or complications of running a team of interdisciplinary students, or maybe just applying for funding outside of your home discipline?
Sure. But first, I since it's back to me, I want to give props to the students. I feel like Adeshola has kind of grown up professionally with the project, and she's been a real boon all the way along, learning right from the ground up. She learned the figures and the interface and all of that for the database. But while she was doing that, she was learning how to learn. So she became a good trainer of other people, and then a good administrator and a good project manager along the way, because she'd been involved right from the ground up. So she's been a real boon, not only for repeated co-op positions, but she's also been part-time work study with us on non-co-op terms. So she's been with us steadily and been a real boon. Real glad to have her. And Nathan just came and, as he said, shook things up. He took a project that I now see as part of the evolutionary trajectory of the project, but at previous points it looked like a system of failures, one after another, trying to get to the point. He took a project that was really lumpy, messy. I didn't know how bad the code was, but in terms of the interface and other approaches to it, it really needed some attention. Unfortunately, I had better funding and got a big team for him, and they colonized the collab space and made massive progress, which is good. And Drake, he won't go golfing with me, but but he fits in really well. It's nice to have him around. Interdisciplinarity. I haven't had too much trouble on the English linguistic and computational side, but the psychology part of it has been difficult to weave in properly. I haven't managed to find. I've found good high-level collaborators, good professorial colleagues who I can get advice from and talk with, but I haven't been able to find anybody who can work successfully to do the psychological research we need. So that's been a real challenge. I'm hoping that as I learn a bit more about how to manage projects, that I'll be able to attract some folks and work in that direction next term. We're opening up a new part of the project in January, and more broad-based, more institutions involved, and I'm thinking I'll be able to get more psychological input into it.
Very cool.
So now we're going to focus a bit more on Go Figure for a second, and probably for the latter half of this podcast episode. So Nathan, can you talk about the development period this past summer and how the game has changed since you came onto the project, like where it is that you started with it and then what it kind of changed into?
I gather it's changed a lot.
It has changed just a little bit.
Actually, maybe I could sort of tee him up a bit by talking about how we got to the point where Nathan joined. Because, as I said, it looked like a series of failures, but I now recognize that there were every failure sort of bequeathed some traits to the next failure until we finally got someplace. So initially, I got Steve's lab at Laurier to put together a design spec for a game, and they came up with a really interesting kind of alien languaged game where people would annotate figures based on a kind of translation theme. It was when the movie Arrival came out, so I think that kind of inspired me. But it looked like a really interesting way of developing a game, and I took that and handed it off to AC Atienza, who probably most of you know as well, has been a figure around the Games Institute for a while. And he just scrapped it immediately and said it's hopeless. We can't do anything with this. We have to start from the ground up all over again.
Classic AC.
But we did retain the name from Steve's lab. Go Figure showed up, but also the context. So the game was designed as an in-class game, so we could leverage classes of students in the same way that lots of psychology data is gathered. I had initially seen it as a kind of free-range game that we'd attract people across the web to play and enlist in the same way that Folded and Wikipedia and so forth are crowdsourced. And I still have that aspiration, but the classroom context is a really good way of localizing it. So we at least took those forward from Steve's lab. AC worked relentlessly on input mechanics, using a keyboard and entering things by Q's and P's and whatnot. and it looked like it might work, but I had under-resourced him. I'd hired a developer to work with him to put it into position, Vossen. But one person wasn't enough. I didn't realize that at the time, and Radu was just kind of basically created something to take the annotated figures that AC's game produced and just put them in a bucket over on the side. They never went near the database. They weren't structured for the database. There was no pipeline to the database. No API. Nothing. So I hired another team to take AC's game and turn it into realization, so we could patch it into the database finally. Anna Marie Westgert Tegert was a co-op who really took the game and turned it into. First of all, she stripped it away as well. This will never work, and rightfully so. We reduced it to much smaller scope rather than every figure in the planet, just a constrained group that we could work with, and set up a kind of primitive, more of a kind of a gamified activity than a game per se, but delivered an MVP, a minimal viable product, and that's what we handed off to Nathan. And take it away.
Yeah, and so I joined the project and I said, this is hopeless, it'll never work. And I was anticipating that I would come up to Professor Harris in my first week and I would say, hey Professor, I think that there needs to be some changes here. And Professor Harris would rip all of his hair out and run out of the room. But I came in, we had this quote unquote game, and it is a gray screen with gray buttons on it, and you press the button and it gives you a point. And it's like, okay, this is a good starting point, but a lot of the code is very messy. A lot of this game is not fun. It's very dull. Things like this. And so, as part of my initial sweep through of the project, I rewrote the entire code. I said, nope, all of this has to go. We rewrite everything. And then I presented, hey, look, Professor, I brought your build times down from 1 second. So every time, or sorry, not 1 minute. Every time you want to make a small change, you change some text, takes a whole minute to rebuild the project. I brought that down to about 50 milliseconds. So really jumping on with getting developer speed up and running, being able to make rapid and continuous changes to the project, really catapulted us into a much better and much more healthy developer lifecycle. And so after that, we swept through, we made all of the major changes that we had to with Go Figure, and then during the second half of our term, we went through and took the same approach to our admin database. So at the end of last term, about 4 months ago, we had a stable state for our Go Figure game. We had a stable state for the admin database, and that's where Drake took over. And so our old team left. They were on co-op. I stuck around, and we brought Drake on.
All right, Drake, if you want to add on of what your experience has been coming on to this part of the, rebuilding of the Go Figure game again.
When I got onto Go Figure, it did look like it was the results of one term's work, to where there was certainly it did look like a game and it did function as a game, and I think my first thought initially was that I wouldn't play it myself, but. And then when I got time to brainstorm myself into how I would fix it, I'm like, right. So the challenges does make sense. And I think the primary challenge of Go Figure in the game sense is making something that's fun but educational, but also low on resources, as in like the assets and having like a game engine behind it, which we don't because it's a browser game. But that was the main challenge to actually gamifying the process. And I kind of realized over time that instead of being a game that players return to for dopamine. It was something that researchers would use and would be an additional component on top of just submitting figures. And I think that was the biggest kind of like aha moment for me. But as of now, Go Figure is definitely coming along. We've had a lot of new things added within the past month or two, and I think looking forward, it is definitely more fun than what I think I would have done myself. And so I'm very happy that our team has put together that.
So for the audience, can you just talk about the, I guess for lack of a better way to put it, like the core gameplay loop?
Yeah, exactly. So previously, at the beginning of when I took over this project, the core gameplay loop was you would go onto the website and you would highlight some text, and then you would press a button and you would get a point, which is in fact a minimum viable product, but we really wanted to expand upon this. So yes, you go there, you highlight some text, you press a button, and you get some points. But it's much more fleshed out. You can now use these points, you can get experience, and you can use this to purchase in-game currencies, to level up, and to buy accessories and different power-ups that you can use to then go back and earn points more efficiently. And by developing your own knowledge of how rhetorical figures work and the different types of rhetorical figures, you are able to level yourself up in a sense to be able to find these more efficiently.
And I think that's really interesting because it kind of comes down to almost like a case of player types. Like exactly. You're not trying to like make a game that's going to appeal to like every quote unquote gamer. But, when I hear you guys talking about it, I'm like, well, this does sound like the sort of game that I would be into playing because I have a PhD in English. But also like my mom, who's a librarian, like also I can see exactly how this would appeal to her. And this kind of goes into my next question, which is that I've heard some of you, I can't remember who, joke about how the ideal scenario would be to have Go Figure be like Wordle, where people like log in every day and like get their like, ooh, I'm so smart.
Duolingo, this kind
Duolingo,
of educational platform that gives people an outlet to express themselves linguistically and whatnot, similar to connections, something that they want to log on daily to just solve puzzles and work things out is what we're aiming for.
Yeah, I've seen those like. This is so off topic, but LinkedIn now has like little games that are like integrated into
indeed.
it. You should see when you guys are done. You should see if you sell Go Figure to LinkedIn and be like, improve your communication skills with rhetorical figures.
I can see that doing really well on a platform like LinkedIn.
But yeah, so the next part I want to go to is just sort of connecting Go Figure back to the Rhetoricon database. Is because if you say did have people signing in every day doing their rhetorical figures, like I don't know what to, like you would with Wordle, then that therefore is then building up the annotated data in the database. So this is what, Randy, you've called in the past free range game sourcing. So I was hoping you could kind of talk a bit more about that, unpack what that is for us.
Yeah, so there's a couple of vectors that we're hoping to leverage. So a game like Fold It, for instance, it is a puzzle, so people get the kind of little buzz from solving a puzzle, and I can't recall if it has a point system or a leaderboard or anything like that. But solving puzzles for a purpose, a lot of people pursue Fold It not just to solve puzzles, but to contribute to the project of biochemistry. And there's another big one at MIT for charting out neural pathways, for instance, connectionist pathways. So we're hoping to be able to attract people who care about science, care about the mind, care about language, but also word nerds, people who do crosswords and Wordle and things like that, people who read a lot, and in their everyday experience, in their using technical literature or recreational literature or social media or journalism or whatever, they encounter these patterns, they copy and paste them and annotate them and put them into the database and again, get points for it, but also contribute to a project on understanding the relation between the mind and language.
Well, and I feel like it's really interesting to me as someone who studies, like my research area is politics and games. So obviously rhetoric is a part of that. And it's interesting because, obviously there's the game aspect of like, oh, I like solving puzzles and that's fun. But there's also this aspect of almost like collective action to it,
Yes.
of like filling, especially when you get into sort of like some of the consequences of the potential, like the annotative data and the small language models and so on and so forth. So could you talk about that a bit, the positive?
Yeah, so the applications, once we have the kind of advanced natural language processing that we're gunning for, can be used for things like fake news detection, toxicity filtering of various sorts. There's a sub-community of computational linguists called argument miners. So they look for inference patterns to see where reasoning might go wrong, good for fake news, misinformation, disinformation, but also where reasoning patterns go right. And in principle, you can turn argument mining loose on a large corpus of something like biochemical literature, since that's what we were talking about earlier, and be able to extract inference patterns and present them to a researcher and say, look, there's a possible syndrome here, or look, there's two things that would not otherwise be connected. If you put them together, maybe there's a treatment for this complication, and so forth. So, argument mining, toxicity detection, and just advanced natural language processing.
Well, and sorry, Sid. I was just going to say the last thing that makes me think of is that because I guess the other component with my research is looking at social media. And one of the things that's happening right now is we have there's so many, so many bots that are out there on social media right now where their entire purpose is just to sow discord. And they do this through very like specific kinds of like divisive rhetoric. And a lot of it, is like specific propaganda, in favor of specific countries and these sorts of things. And I feel like, I don't know, we're living through a time where I feel like a better understanding of rhetoric is something that could benefit everyone. Maybe I'm overstating things, but...
Well, rhetoricians have always felt that their understanding of rhetoric is going to fix the world. So, but and I think there's a kind of arms race between the misinformation, disinformation producers and the detectors and filters. And I'm not sure if there's any real progress going on. But at least, again, in principle, another thing that this kind of language processing do is what's called authorship attribution. So you can find out if somebody has written the text or not, if you know enough about their rhetorical strategies, the figures they employ, and provide the algorithms with a new text that's never seen before, rate it as 85, 90, 95, or 3 or 4 or 6% possibly written by this same person. And that's a way of maybe being able to detect bots. If there's a stylistic signature that they have, and you know what to look for, you can disable them.
But could also be used to detect if Donald Trump is using the speech from Legally Blonde in public, which is something that happened like many years ago. So that was a very dated reference.
Yeah, well, that's just flat out crowdsourcing. Enough people watch them bungle and then let them know about, or let everyone else know about it.
So Adeshola, for this project, for Go Figure in particular, you've been doing some testing for it, and thinking a bit about the kind of like user experience side of things. How has that been going for you? How has it actually been like using this? And would you say it's like, something that you would want to do, or like something that is like, especially since when we often talk about gaming, there's like a mechanic of like needs to be fun potentially, because not all games need to be fun, but is there kind of like a draw for it for you to keep coming back to like this type of game?
I think the development team has done a very great job with making the game more fun. I mean, it's because now we're like trying to incorporate like points and also like characters, so you could actually use the points to, I mean, you could use points or coins to purchase clothes or characters. Like right now, it's like the cat.
I was gonna say, I've heard you guys talking about a cat. I'm not sure why, but.
Yeah, it was one of the cat Rebecca designed for the game. Well, yeah, she drew for the game. But yeah, it's been nice being like part of the process of like making it more usable for RAs and also like people who enjoy like linguistics or even like rhetorical figures. And so that's kind of like, I would say, like the perspective I would bring in also some of the RAs, because during the brainstorming process for the game, we like the development team, the data and content team have been heavily involved with brainstorming with the development team. And then also we've had like sessions with the RAs talking about what they would think would be more appealing to them for the game and also reasonable. We had like a big brainstorming session last week. We also had one at the beginning of the term. So it's just been nice, like giving, and Nathan's been the one like telling us like to provide feedback for the game. Yeah, it's been nice being able to contribute by just giving feedback on what I would like, I would want out of the game, and I would play the game obviously if it had like those options with like the characters obviously to purchase, and then also like just playing around, just being able to play around with characters.
That's a super interesting kind of addition to the game. It's like avatar customer character customization. Was there like any sort of inspiration, or is it just like, oh, let's just add a fun little avatar?
Yeah, pretty much. It was let's what if we had a cat that you could interact with in a kind of Tamagotchi style, and it's gone through a couple iterations. The most recent one being from a brainstorming session that the data and content team did.
I do feel like the Venn diagram of people who like word games and people like cats is like just a circle. So
the amount of cat games we've had at the GR.
I think that's smart. Yeah. So I guess we're coming to the end now. What's next for Go Figure? Is it user testing? Is it you were saying more maybe psychological studies or?
Yeah, it's the free range version that's that we're going to be working towards now that we've got a very solid class based one that we can use with we call it the encapsulated game. We can just give it to a group of people to work with together, and we can go in and teach them how to look for figures and then turn it over to them, and be kind of guided along by RAs. But none of that's available on the web, right? So we need to build up a series of tutorials, because you can't just say to anybody, find some antimetabolies. You have to tell them what antimetabolies are. You have to give them examples of them. You have to give them a chance to try out annotating them so they learn both the interface and what the figures are themselves and how they group together. So we're gonna be working on training modules and the free range version of the game, and also be thinking about things like marketing plans, how we can draw people in.
That's great. No, this was thank you all so much for joining today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, providing a lot with your commentary and also your experiences on working on these two very interesting projects and how it is that they feed together. For those who are listening and are interested in learning more about the project, we'll have a bunch of links and how to get into contact with people in the description. But yes, thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thanks very much for doing this. It was fun, and thanks again to the students for participating.
Yeah,
yes,
thank you.
Of course.
Awesome. Thanks.